Today I thought I would do the theater tag on YouTube. I looked around at a couple of other people's channels, and a lot of the people that do vlogs pertaining to theater are, how do I put this delicately, high school girls. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. In fact, sometimes they have really astute things to say about the theater, and I really, really admire the enthusiasm they put into their videos. And they're always into musicals and the homework assignments that they have and scenes they have to do. And I thought it'd be a nice change of pace for me to do the theater tag because a lot of the videos I do on this channel are about the theater, and obviously I'm not in high school anymore. It's a distant memory in my past. And I don't do musicals that often. Mostly I do experimental and traditional plays. So I thought I'd take a stab at the theater tag and see what shakes out. So here we go. What was your favorite show when you were younger? My favorite show when I was younger was Barnum, the musical, which is a kind of a biographical musical about P.T. Barnum.
There is a sucker born every minute.
It's a pretty good musical. Have you ever been in a show, and if so, how many? Yes, lots actually, lots and lots. When did you first get into theater? I got into theater when I was 15 years old. I was a sophomore in high school, and that year I waited too long to sign up for the elective that I needed, and instead of being able to take the art class that I was eligible for, it was filled up, so I had to choose between dance and theater. And I had a crush on a girl who was in the theater department at the time, and I ended up choosing theater strictly because of that. And later on, I kind of got bit by the bug. So that's actually how I wound up in the theater, because of a girl. What's your favorite play? Cyrano de Bergerac by Edmond Rostand. Have you ever seen a show on Broadway or the West End in London? I have seen a play on Broadway. I've seen multiple plays on Broadway, and I've seen plays in the West End of London. I used to live in London back in the late 90s. And I spent most of my money on beer and theater, using my student ID to see theater all over London, actually. In pub theaters, the National Theatre, the Royal Court, and a bunch of plays all over the West End as well. That student ID was super handy. And I pretty much starved, but I saw a lot of theater while I was out there. I was on a study abroad program at the time. What's your favorite role you've ever played? My favorite role that I've ever played is probably the protagonist in my play Chop. Chop is a solo show that I wrote that I performed all around the country. The main character in that play is a very lost individual who stumbles into an underground amputation fetish group and may have found out where he actually belongs. It's very dark and weird and romantic and funny. And I wrote it for myself, so it became my favorite part to play. What's your dream role you've yet to play? Cyrano de Bergerac, from the play Cyrano de Bergerac by Edmond Rostand. What's your favorite film adaptation of a stage play? I'm trying to think of adaptations of plays or musicals that I've seen put on film. Here's the thing, film's a different medium completely. And sometimes people do really well, filmmakers do really well in adapting musicals for the screen. They make the story into a film. Sometimes it just looks like a recorded play, which ruins both the movie and the play itself. I don't know. Probably the French version of Cyrano de Bergerac with Gérard Depardieu. That would be up there on the list. And also the Chris Columbus Rent that came out. I think it was Chris Columbus. Maybe it was Robert Zemeckis. I know it came out a couple years ago. And it wasn't half bad. They got the original cast back, and everybody was, 15 or 20 years older than they were when the play premiered. But they all knew those characters really well. And the movie wasn't too bad. I thought it was all right. What's your favorite song from a musical? Huh. If you could see any story made into a stage play or a musical, what would it be? A story that hasn't been told on stage yet? Maybe the Apollo 13 mission. That'd be interesting as a play. Who would you want at your dream theater dinner party? Oh, man. Okay, well, first of all, I would have Peter Brook, because Peter Brook is my go-to guy in the theater. He's my biggest influence. And I think he'd be a very good dinner guest. I would probably also have Edmund Rostand at the table, who wrote Cyrano de Bergerac, because that's one of my favorite plays. I would probably have Robert Brustein sitting at the table. Julie Taymor would be invited. Sarah Rule, the playwright, because I dig her stuff a lot. And maybe Henry Irving, the actor-manager from the early 1900s. I'd probably invite him. Oh, and Orson Welles.
Ah, the French champagne.
Definitely Orson Welles. What's the biggest change you feel about the theater from when you were younger to now? The biggest change that I have felt in doing theater from when I was younger to now would probably be, I used to do theater just for the sake of doing it. And I think a lot of people start out doing it that way. They just like the joy of being on stage. And when I started out in the theater, that's how I looked at it as well. It did not really matter the project. It didn't really matter what my role was in the theater. It didn't really matter even if it was really that good for the audience. I just like to be on stage with a bunch of other people doing theater just for the sake of doing it. As I've grown older and matured as a theater artist, I've learned that theater is really, for me, is just a means of expression. It's just a means of saying something that I want to say. And years and years ago, I came to the conclusion that if I wanted to stay in the theater and be fulfilled as an artist, I would have to find out what it is I want to say and then go about saying it. So, inversely, I don't audition for plays that often anymore, outside of the ones that I do myself. I usually write my own plays, and then I present my own plays, and I think of it as a mission of mine, as well as kind of a, I don't want to sound hokey about it, but kind of a sacred duty to add to the canon and not just regurgitate a bunch of classics or musicals or shows from the past. I think it's important to invent new shows and not just write them and give them off to other people to do, like a lot of playwrights do, which I have no problem with. But I like to write my own plays and then stage my own plays and then put them out into the world. And those plays and projects reflect specifically what I have to say about the world. So that would probably be the biggest difference. What do you feel is the biggest challenge about doing theater? The biggest challenge of doing theater, I would have to say, is staying excited about it. I know that sounds odd, but I've done theater now for over 25 years, and I go through highs and lows. Sometimes I don't want to do it that often, and sometimes I have a bunch of ideas and I want to get them on stage as soon as possible. When I say fight to stay excited is because over time, it's hard to it's always like inventing the wheel to get people to come out to see the shows. It's always like inventing the wheel every time I sit down to write a new play. It never gets easier. It never, ever smooths out. I always have to go into the belly of the whale every time I invent a new story. And every time I stage a play, getting an audience out to see the work is probably the most difficult thing. And eventually, that just beats down a person. You think you're just yelling at the wind. And while I think it's glorious in a poetic sort of way to just yell at the wind my whole life, at some point I would like a sustainable audience, and I would like people to catch on that the people that would dig my stuff will continue to dig my stuff. And I'm not saying that the kind of theater I make is for everybody, but there's a group of people out there, I'm pretty sure, that would really, really like my stuff, and getting them to believe that they will like more of my stuff is kind of the biggest uphill battle in the theater, the biggest challenge so far. So that continually going back to the drawing board every time I invent something new, and pretty much going back to the drawing board to try to get an audience to come out to see the play is probably the biggest challenge. And I never ever forget that I'm doing this so that an audience sees it. So writing a play and putting it in a drawer is not enough. Writing a play and putting it on a stage and having people see it, and that's the important ingredient, people have to see it. You need the audience as part of the theater experience. That's probably the most challenging part of it. Any advice for emerging theater makers? My advice to young theater makers or emerging theater makers would be keep going. It's an endurance race. People eventually drop out. They get quote unquote real jobs. They start families. They settle down. And I'm not saying you can't start a family and you can't settle down, but you can't stop. That's the thing. You can't stop. About the point people put in their, that Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hours, 10 years worth of work, they often go off and do something else. And just the point they get really good at what they're doing. So my advice is don't stop. Do as much as you can for as long as you can, and work as hard as you can, and you will just get better and better and better. And finally, why do you love the theater? Why do I love the theater? All right, well, I love the theater for a variety of reasons, and the chief being that it's ephemeral. It disappears. The people that see it were either there and witnessed it and experienced it, or they weren't and they missed out. And in a way, that sounds very exclusive, but I really actually kind of like that exclusivity of it. I like the fact that it disappears, that there's something special about it. You can't bring it up on your phone. You can't rent it from someplace and watch it at your leisure. You can't watch it in your pajamas in your room, sitting on a couch. You have to go to a theater and see it in real time with a bunch of other people sitting there witnessing it all at the same time. And all these people in the audience are individuals, and they're getting something individual out of the experience, but they're all there, they're all in the same place together. I like that about it. I also like that theater kind of combines all of the art forms. For a restless individual like myself, this is great. You've got visual art, music, lights, dance, sound. All this stuff is kind of combined together to make theater happen. And it's like a puzzle that never ever quite gets solved. And there's always a way to do it better. Always. There's always a way to find, to improve it. And this constant need for improvement over and over and over again for this organic moving process is something that really, really appeals to me. When I direct a play, I'm a pretty hands-on director, and I don't leave during the production. I come back and I give notes to the actors throughout the entire run of the show. Some actors hate that. They actually hate that a lot. But I take an anecdote from Peter Brook, who had a friend visiting him backstage at the end of his run of Conference of the Birds. And he had been running for months and months and months and months. And the friend accompanied him backstage, and he thought that the guy was Peter Brook was going to give the actors, a little pep talk and a heads up and like, go have a good show, everybody. But instead he started giving them notes. I mean, not intricate notes, but he started giving notes. And when they were walking away, the friend turned to Peter Brook and he said, hasn't this play been running for months? Like, why are you giving them notes on the last production? And Peter Brook looked at the guy straight in the eyes and said, why should this audience be deprived of potential improvement? I love that. I love that so much. So it's an organic, ongoing process. So if I do a painting, the painting is solid, it's stuck. Once it hangs on somebody's wall, I don't take the painting back off the wall and keep working on it. If I, come up with this video, I'll probably not go back and redo this video when this video's done. It's set, it's recorded, but theater is alive. It's organic and it keeps evolving, and so there's always the potential for improvement. And I think that's a good synonym for life, a good analogy for life. I really like that about the theater. Anyway, those are the reasons I love the theater. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching my video. If you like what you saw, please hit the like button, or better yet, subscribe to the channel. Also, I've been publishing a selection of my plays on Amazon, including I Brought Home a Chupacabra. If you'd like your own copy, please click on the book cover or see a link in the description below. What's your favorite film about blah 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 blah?